and welcome to the award-winning basketball show. I'm Nathan Stremple. It is great to be here. Big shout out to all of our partners that allow us to bring you this show week in, week out. Shout out to Unibet, to Alcatel, to the Daily Telegraph, and all of their sister publications at News Corp, and also throwbackstore.com.au for the first time ever. A three-way show with two legends, Shane the Hammer Hill and Steve Carfino.
And I had to go with the Red Army.
It's all about the Red this week.
Yeah, it's all about Toronto. Kyle Lowry, hey, 15 and 9 dimes. I love him. Couldn't resist it.
Kyle looking great, and just nice to see no T-shirt there, Steve.
That's
Shane
right.
standing right next to you.
Well, I had to go with Steph Curry.
Push-ups.
Light-skinned brothers are making a comeback, and I had to get the guns out. You know, doing all that work, got to get the guns out.
Well,
Bam.
It's NBL finals time. Steve Guns are ready to go. We've won the award for the best online show at the NBL. It's great to see. Shout out to the second best podcast at the NBL, the boys at Trash Talk. But we are kicking it off this week talking about, Steve, your opinion. It's time for Carfino's call.
Yeah, I wonder, with all these coaching changes, do these clubs have a plan? Are they going to get their coach first and then get the players? Are they going to sign players and tell the coach, you have to go with these guys? Some type of a plan. How about when you pick your imports? Are you going to slot your imports when you need them, or are you just going to throw the players up in the air and just hope for the best? I want to know that. Are you going to say, we're going to have a running style, we're going to be fast break, we're going to be exciting, but you don't have any players yet. So if you have guys that are slow, bogged down half-court offense, you might want to get a coach who wants to run in the half-court. I'm just making a couple of suggestions here. That's my rant, because I'm really tired of seeing teams with no direction and they're trying to make up for it halfway into the season.
Shane, I don't know about you. You have a hammer to emphasise your point. Do you just give like a big flex at the end of it, Steve, and say that's what I'm talking about?
That's right. That's why I had to have the guns out.
That is Carfino's call. Lost a bit of coaching merry-go-round. We'll touch on that later, but that's Carfino's call for this week. Well, it's NBL finals time, so plenty of time for some stroking later, but Steve's come in with his call. It's now time, Shane, for your turn under the hammer.
Well, where else do you go for under the hammer than the Brisbane Bullets? Let's be honest.
Give my hammer in.
Mate, I expected so much more. 6 weeks before the end of the season, we're talking them up. We're saying they could win the championship. Lamar Patterson, you look at their players. Bairstow, Kadee, Glidden, Mika, Hodgson, Gibbo. They're star-studded. Finally, they've come from bottom. They've given themselves a chance. We're saying they can get it done. And what do? 59 points.
Ooh, wow.
59 points. That's what they do. Yeah. 59 points in Perth. What, they've had 2 weeks to prepare, or did they have 2 weeks to prepare?
Yeah.
None of the NBL players went on national duties. Andre Lamanis did. If you're the general manager, how do you let Andre Lamanis go to play against Kazakhstan? I can't even say it. I could get 20 against Kazakhstan. They were terrible. They were always going to win that game, and you can't say you need one more win to be able to get top spot and be the highest seeded team. They were always going to win that, and then you win that game, then you come home. No, not good enough. And the Brisbane Bullets, anyone who says, oh yeah, great effort for them to go bottom to be able to make the top four and then get swept, because their performance back at home was lackluster at best. They allowed Tariko White, you'll see the highlights of Tariko White, he was open for the whole game. And the Perth Wildcats were great. So you take the head off to them. We'll talk more about them. They were great. But I tell you, the Brisbane Bullets, you are under the hammer for a reason.
Well, it's grand final time, and it's time for everyone to go up a level. I feel like it might have been the strongest hammering we've yet. Brisbane Bullets this week, you're under the hammer. Well, we're now preparing for an NBL Grand Final series, Perth versus Melbourne, which leaves us with two semi-final series to unpack. Shane needs a moment to recover from under the hammer. So I'll start with you, Steve. Perth versus Brisbane. 2 seasons of wooden spoons. They did make it into the playoffs. Do you give them any sort of a pass mark for that, or is it a case that going out in straight sets is not good enough? You're going to hammer me if I'm not careful.
I know. It sounds like he's the host of the Brisbane end-of-season dinner, telling the sponsors that it's been a good year. We've gone from the wooden spoon, and we got ourselves into the playoffs. You put a team together to win a championship. And if you're the Australian coach and you get the players that you want, he handpicks. He basically was recruiting while he had his Australian team. He handpicked these guys, and he's supposed to win a championship. They were playing championship caliber type basketball going late into the regular season. So yeah, they got to be disappointed. And like Shane mentioned, coach isn't there at the most crucial time of the year. You're really not positioning yourself to win a championship. And they limped into the postseason, and they just got embarrassed once they got there.
Okay, so both of you are pretty strong on the way Brisbane finished the season and definitely their playoff performance. We'll focus on Perth, the winner, in a moment. Unpack for me Brisbane's performance in those two games.
Well, but before that, they won 2 out of their last 8 games. They won an overtime game to the Illawarra Hawks at home. They won a game against New Zealand to make the playoffs, where New Zealand were concentrating on Mad Monday. Let's face it, that was the last game of the season. So they won 2 out of 8, swept in 2 games where they really didn't give themselves much of a chance. Their defence just wasn't on song. What they allowed the Perth Wildcats to do on their home floor was really disappointing. And their management at the end of the game, I could not believe it. Down 3, there was like 28, 29, 30 seconds to go. So there was going to be a significant chunk of time if they got a stop to be able to then get down and hit a 3, and they fouled. And then I was like, what the hell happened then? Then they took it in from the side, and then they fouled again and sent them to the line and virtually turned it into a 2-possession game. Game management was woeful for the Brisbane Bullets.
So what do you put it down to? Talked up as title favourites. They beat Melbourne United twice, about 6 weeks out from the end of the season, and you mentioned going 2-8 from there on out. What do you guys put that down to?
Well, I put it down to just being inconsistent. They've been wooden spoon. They kind of played like it when the games were on the line. And when in the last quarter, you see Melbourne United, and this is a team that I love. They're tough down the stretch. They get the stops. They execute. And Brisbane just didn't do that. They just laid an egg late in the season and late in games.
And they didn't have big-time players stand up. And, I love Jason Kadee, but 2 donuts isn't going to get it done. And I'm not apologising. But other guys didn't stand up either. They didn't. Like Bairstow, you're an NBA player. He had 19 points a month ago, 19 points in the first half, then backed it up again, but didn't ever go and get 30 or 35. He's a quality player. And these guys did not bring it to be able to get it done, and they just limped their way to the finals and then limped their way out.
Just re-signed Matt Hodgson for 2 years. Where to from here for the Brisbane Bullets?
You can go first on that one.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, Andre sounds like he's going to be the coach again. So, he's going to be able to put together some good players. A bit of speculation that maybe Sobey's on the radar there as well. He would obviously be a great pickup, another boomer, coming into the fold. But they've got to get their imports right. Lamar Patterson was awesome, but they've done a terrible job over 3 years of signing imports that have either been good enough to be able to help them make the playoffs or win championships, and they've discarded people. They had that Buford last year that was great, and then they sacked him with a handful of games to go, so he obviously didn't fit for whatever reason. So they've got to get their recruiting right.
Well, I think the fact that if you're going to go into a game and you're going to lose the guard matchup, you're coming up against Casper Ware Jr., you're coming against Randall, you're coming against Bryce Cotton. Every single game, if you're losing that point guard matchup, you are going to lose crucial games. I think you got to get that right. I think this league shows you have to be strong at the point guard position, extremely strong if you're going to win a championship, and that's why these two teams are in the grand final.
Buford, a lot of talk about mentally, just wasn't there off the court. So you're saying they need to get the imports
recruiting, right?
Yeah. So you're saying, fair call, you're saying they need to get the imports right. And you mentioned Nathan Sobey. It takes my thoughts to Adelaide 36ers. Brisbane had to win that last game against New Zealand to beat the 36ers for that last spot. Would Adelaide have put up a better showing against Perth?
They would have, but we talk about recruiting. You want to bring up Buford? What about Holt? Why the hell was Holt signed at the start of the year? They wasted any sort of momentum at the start with somebody that wasn't up to it and didn't fit last year. Just poor recruiting. Adelaide would have been much better because they had fight. They played with a lot more spirit than what the Brisbane Bullets did. And whilst they didn't win enough games to get there, so they didn't deserve it, I felt like they would have given a little bit more come the playoffs.
We're talking a lot about the team that went out. Do we want to focus a bit on Perth and how good they were and why they took care of business in 2?
Well,
yeah, well, this is a professional team. They're coached well. They execute. They play to their strengths. They know how to win when the season is on the line. They did a great job of winning without Bryce Cotton. That's some great coaching right there. And people say, oh, yeah, they really weren't playing the top teams. Who cares? It was very difficult to win consistently in this competition. Now, they won enough games to when they went on a slide, they were able to still have top position. Perth they're strong, and they're so good at home. But I think Trevor Gleeson just doesn't get enough respect around this league as far as coaching. At the right end of the season, he always gets it right, and his team is playing their best basketball.
He should have been top 2. We said that here a couple of weeks ago in Coach of the Year. But they were fantastic. And Bryce Cotton, we know he's a superstar. We know he can score. But 10 assists, career-high 10 assists. So he was able to adapt to the way Brisbane were playing. So they were really funneling him in and taking away his three-point shot. But he just found a way to be able to get other people open. Tarico White stood up when they needed to be able to get it done. Nick Kay was fantastic again, 15 rebounds or something. But they all slot into their little roles of being able to help the team win. And that's why they've made 33 straight finals appearances, because they've done this for a long time. They lay the foundation and they slot people in to play those roles.
Yeah, basketball IQ for Bryce Cotton. You can't fault it to be able to adjust and get 10 assists. We'll talk about Perth more when we talk about this grand final matchup. Any final thoughts on that Perth-Brisbane series, Steve?
Oh, where do we start? It's just a great series. You talk about, I love point guard matchups. So you're going to go with Casper Ware Jr., Bryce Cotton. I mean,
you're talking about the old one?
I was saying any final thoughts on Perth-Brisbane before we go to Perth-Melbourne.
Yeah, read the
Look,
schedule,
you're just on to Casper already.
Read the schedule.
We've done Brisbane to death. Maybe
Let's
that's
go.
a no from Steve.
Yeah.
So
Can
Perth,
we move on?
Perth taking care of Brisbane in 2. That's semi-final series 1. Semi-final series 2, much talked about. Melbourne versus Sydney, one for the ages. Melbourne came out and got it done in 2. So you look at Sydney with a very talented group. Steve, I'll start with you. Is that a success to take the Kings back into the playoffs but go out in 2, or is it similar to Brisbane when near enough's not good enough?
All right, well, so we're going right back to the awards dinner at the end of the year. No, not good enough. They've got so much talent. They had 14,000 people at the game. Just disappointing. I was disappointed at how frazzled Sydney would get. Like one thing goes wrong and then guys are walking back to the bench, ignoring the coach, pouting when they come out. Just their body language was bad. I just think you're 6 points down in the third quarter, and it looked like they were 16 down in the third quarter, or even in the fourth quarter. I was just disappointed. This is when you come together and we talk about, the leadership that should be shown, especially by some of the veterans that are on the team. It just wasn't there.
Talk about leadership. Shane, your thoughts. We saw key guys for Sydney not stepping up when required. Talk about whether Randall's injured or not. Bogut didn't have his best series.
Well, I was asked at the start of the season, is this one of the most talented teams ever put together? And I said, yes, it is. And no doubt with having the NBA calibre of players, the imports, guys like Lish and Yuli, Randall, unbelievable talent. But they got their four-man wrong. Said it from day dot. David Ware, I'm sure he's a nice bloke, but he just wasn't up to it. They had a deficiency in rebounding, and when you add Kickett there, we know all his strengths, but he's a liability, rebounding and on defence, and that was just too hard to be able to overcome in big games, in my opinion. They didn't mesh. You could tell that there was problems in the locker room from the start about the way the Kings should play, particularly at the offensive end, and it seemed like they were too worried about that and really not being able to dig in to be able to get critical stops and play together. So I agree with Steve. Great effort for the owners to be able to get 14,500 people, and it's not a wasted year. Bogut back in the league was unbelievable for the NBL and for the Sydney Kings. Got people talking, having an opinion about it, jumping back on board, but they have to get this next period right because there's been no foundations laid. There really hasn't. The only foundations I feel like they've got Bogut, they've got Lish, and they've probably got Newley, guys in their mid-30s. I'm not sure.
Very good guys in their mid-30s.
Yeah, but they're the foundations laid for the future. So that's okay, but your foundations, when we talked about Perth, they've signed K for the future. So you know what they're going to be able to get done. So they can still make it work, and with a massive budget of what they've got, they will make it work. They're going to be able to, make some better selections next year, and I think they'll be a lot more successful for the next 3 years.
Talked about on this show, it's talked about a lot, what kind of a grand final matchup that would have been Melbourne-Sydney. We saw Sydney at its best during the season. It was very good, top of the ladder for a large chunk of the season. Did you expect a 2-0 sweep?
I think as the season and as we drew to the postseason, I think we're starting to see like a sweep. On that was both semifinals. Both of the teams that went through the grand final were superior to their opponents in the semifinal. And I think that was clear going into the series, and the result really didn't surprise me. They played very good basketball. Perth were tough. Melbourne were tough. Personally, I'm going to go on the record right now. I think Melbourne United is the best team in the competition. I've been saying that for a while because every time I watch them, their depth, their defensive strategy. They just executed down the stretch. Now, I spoke to Dean Vickerman at the Qantas Club, and he was saying, but we keep putting ourselves in that position where we should be blowing teams out, but we're letting them back in the game. But, in the end, they look very comfortable in late game situations.
And see, on that,
Steve subtly slides the Qantas Club in there. Just lets everyone know where it's at.
I'm a lifetime
See, I reckon
member,
I reckon the break was just perfect for them because they were limping into the playoffs. They looked really poor in the last month, Melbourne United.
Melbourne, yeah.
Yeah, but once they got there, that break, you could tell they freshened up. They were excited about playing. They'd been there. They've done it before. They've got a lot of confidence in their systems and the people they've got. DJ Kennedy was a massive pickup. Mitch McCarron was a massive pickup as well. Pledger has been critical as well, having that sort of size to be able to come in when Boone got in foul trouble in game one. So the recruits they've got, I'm like Steve, I've been on Melbourne United from the start and I'm still on them. They were super impressive. Picked them to beat Sydney in the first and the second game, and I think they can go over there and cause trouble against Perth. So I know they're going to be all sooky that we're not picking them and all the rest of it, but they are
surprised
quality.
they're not wearing a Melbourne United jersey tonight. You're biased
I
towards
couldn't
Melbourne,
find
aren't
one.
you?
I turned this joint upside down.
We'll touch about that grand final matchup shortly, but just the final thoughts on Melbourne. I think maybe it's worth touching on Casper Ware and his performance, that Ware versus Randall matchup. Ware well and truly on top in that semi-final matchup.
Yeah, it wasn't a matchup. He absolutely dominated it. He really did. And, I like Randall, but 1 for 15 in that second game, just couldn't get it done. Maybe he wasn't in the system that he really wanted to be able to play and didn't feel like he had the same support and could play his role as well.
Carrying an injury, maybe? There's been a bit of talk there.
Cut it out, mate. No, he was fine. We've all had games like that. It's just disappointing to have it at that stage. But Casper Ware, all kudos to him. He was unbelievable in game one. Game two, just as impressive. 17 points in that first quarter. He absolutely dominated and everyone else jumped on board.
One final one to touch on in terms of individuals in that game. You mentioned DJ Kennedy, Mitch McCarron, but Chris Golding took a role coming off the bench late in the season and well and truly last year's grand final MVP, captain of the team, well and truly stepped up in the semi.
Okay, that's a credit to Chris Golding. I mean, he's come in, he's had to come off the bench, he's had to put his ego aside, but that's great coaching. Dean Vickerman does a great job of getting all these guys to buy in. Whether you're not buying into his defensive philosophy, there are consequences to not playing the team basketball. And at the end of the season, he's right. He's got, Joey does a good job in Adelaide of doing that. Wasn't able to get it done this year, but Dean Vickerman does a great job of getting the guys on the same page. And that's one of the things you got to do. You got to put the team that starts best, get your defensive system down, and you get that established, and then you can throw him in and give him that scoring punch, and that's vital. Like he came off the bench and he was a game breaker in game one and game two. Played a fantastic role coming off the bench, and that's huge.
And make no mistake about it, he didn't like it at all.
No.
Chris Golding has got a lot of pride. He did not like coming off the bench, but accepted it. And I think, to back up your point, is his defense has actually improved. He became a great passer. He's so tough to be able to defend off those step-ups in the pick and roll. So they've just got great balance. And no other team in the league has that punch of a Chris Golding coming off the bench to be able to drop triples like that. They're so deep. And they are so good to watch.
And I did say that was last, but it'd be remiss not to circle back to this. A few weeks ago, Dan Kickett was imitating Golding, flopping, and you said, if I'm Chris Golding, I'm saying, come guard me one-on-one. And you saw Golding take him off the dribble, break his ankles through the league, step back three right on Dan Kickett. He's got a long memory, Golding.
He certainly does. We heard that with Rob Canning after the game.
I gave it to him.
All quality and great final series, and they the two best teams are playing off, and that's what makes it exciting.
Well, that's semi-final series 2. Melbourne United getting the job done against the Sydney Kings. The moment we have been waiting for all NBL season. It tips off this Friday. Melbourne United looking to go back-to-back against a Perth Wildcats team looking to win a franchise 9th championship. Friday night, a little tips off, gentlemen. A lot of people saying, and I am assuming you agree, the two best teams making it through to the grand final.
Oh, no doubt about that. And we have been going on and on and on about Melbourne United, and I think it's a Melbourne United kind of heavy show right now, but Perth are favored. I'm not sure how you're looking at me, but Perth are favored. They have a home court advantage. They have won championships. They have beaten Melbourne United. They are favored.
They should be favourite because 9 of the last 10 champions have had home court advantage. They have to be favourite. Have you seen some of the calls that Perth get at home? Serious. If they don't win, it's a choke, right?
They should win.
They
should win.
definitely
I
should
don't
win.
think they're going to win, but they should win.
I'm the same.
Talk about choking. I was just going to grab a Latrell Sprewell jersey off the back there as we talk about the choke. Well, what are the key matchups then? Melbourne versus Perth. Perth favourite being at home. Melbourne the defending champs, though. It goes through them this season. What are the key matchups for you guys? You started talking before about Bryce Cotton and Casper Ware.
Well, that's right. But before Shane jumps in, because he's got one of those dominant personalities, so I got to get in real early when I want to make a point. Bryce Cotton's not going to guard Casper Ware, so you can't really call that the matchup. You can say they're going to have as big of an impact in the game, yes, but you just can't say, okay, that matchup going against one another, but that is huge. Those guys have to come up big. The one thing about Casper in the Sydney series was when he had the 17-point first quarter, then he was able, when they ran him off the three-point line. Then he's getting a leg lock. He's in there taking his time, making good decisions, distributing the basketball. And like you said, Bryce Cotton was able to do that in Game 2 against Brisbane. That's what makes it so exciting for me. I always talk about the guards because the big guys just rebound, get the ball to the guards, and shut up.
Screen.
Oh, yeah, that too.
As we've got two guards on the show, there's no doubt the Bigs will play a significant part in the series. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of Josh Boone and Nick Kay playing a part. As you talk about that guard matchup, you're right, Casper Ware, he'll see a lot of Damian Martin, Mitch Norton probably back from injury as well. But Casper is that two-way guard. You'd think he will spend a chunk of time guarding Bryce Cotton as well.
Oh, he'll spend the entire time on him. He's the best two-way player in the league and just a terrific defensive point guard. So, make no mistake about that. As Steve said, Martin will go to Casper Ware, though. That will leave an advantage. If you're Melbourne United, you're going to go at Bryce Cotton at the other end, and they've got the players to be able to do it. You make him come off turnouts and defend guys like Chris Golding. When they come on, McCarron is a bit bigger. He'll be able to take it at him as well. So it's going to be just a great matchup, but so many players that can make big shots in those two teams, but they won't get their own way like they did in the semi-finals. So Casper Ware coming off, I thought the pick and roll defense from the Sydney King was terrible. So he came off and had open shots all the time. Same thing from the Perth Wildcats. Open shots against the Brisbane Bullets in rotations were just all over the place. And we're seeing those highlights. White was two people running to other people. He's the only hot man and he's just left wide open. That will not happen against Melbourne United.
Well, you talk about the obvious ones in Casper and Bryce Cotton, two MVP favourites. I like how you say Mitch McCarron's a bit bigger. I reckon Mitch McCarron's lucky if he's 6'3", but we saw him trying to take David Ware in the block.
What do you reckon Bryce Cotton is?
No, I just love that Mitch McCarron plays so much bigger than he is. But let's talk about the X factors then. So Casper Ware, Bryce Cotton, the obvious ones. Who are the guys that you may not think of? You've mentioned Tariq White was shooting the ball well against Brisbane. DJ Kennedy you brought up in that semi-final series as well. Who do you guys see as the X factors that might change the series?
Okay, once again, I'm going to jump in front of Shane. I'm going to say that DJ Kennedy and Dave Barlow are just key for Melbourne United. Those guys give them so much depth and so much versatility, especially on the defensive end of the floor. And I like the fact that, you got Dave Barlow on a pick and pop, and then you've also got DJ Kennedy. If he's not hitting shots or if he's not getting to the rim or Euro stepping around, he's grabbing rebounds. He's a tough defender. Those guys are versatile. They can guard like forward positions. And so that's what I think is going to be key, because this is going to be a defensive series. It's not going to be like the semifinal. It's not going to be a bunch of open shots. It's not going to be a lot of defensive breakdowns. It's going to be the D. And I think that Melbourne United are more versatile. Even though Perth have the best defender this competition's ever seen in Damian Martin, I think that Melbourne United have more depth on the defensive end of the floor and more versatility.
I'm glad you clarified it was Damian Martin and they hadn't signed Darnell Meeks as their third import late in the season. Having the best defender ever.
Darnell Meeks seems to see everything that I do, because I get some type of social media little thing from him. Darnell Meeks like, I wouldn't say that.
I was just looking for a way to throw a third import into you, Shane, because you said all season that Perth needed a third import and they were a player short. You still believe that if they finished top in the grand final series?
Without doubt. And Tariq White will not have the same impact in the grand final series as what he's had in the semi-finals. And that's where I think then people will start saying, oh, I think they need that next person, because we know that Kay, he's a terrific player, All-Star 5 and so well deserved this year. And he'll play a great role again. He rebounds, he defends, he'll be able to chip in at the offensive end. But I think if they go through dry patches and Tariq White isn't scoring, then they're going to be going down the line and then they're trying to get Steindl. He's not going to get open shots, well, not many against Melbourne United. So who can create their own shot if it gets to that last 8 seconds and they haven't been able to get anything from their offense? And that's what I'm talking about, of them needing that next import. And I think that's where they're going to end up being hurt.
We talked a bit about the players. It's definitely worth taking a moment to reflect on the coaches. Dean Vickerman, again, winning Coach of the Year. You've talked about how Trevor Gleeson should have been right up there as well, an assistant with the Boomers. What part is that going to play? How do you see that coaching battle playing out?
Another reason why I like Melbourne United, and like I said, I think Trevor Gleeson's been underrated as far as getting accolades for Coach of the Year, but I like Dean Vickerman because he's going to make those adjustments. Steinel's not going to get the looks that he's going to get, and his guys have bought in. I'm not saying Perth, but whenever I give somebody a compliment from the other team, Perth always say I'm not giving them any love. For goodness sake, I'm just giving Melbourne United some love right here.
Stop hating on Perth, mate. Why you hate on Perth?
I seem to like them more.
You always do.
You rub off on me. You're hard on them.
That's what you do.
But I just think Dean Vickerman, in a 3-game series, I think he has the ability to shut teams down. Sydney had, it was like Sydney went to a zone, they executed a lob, and Boone missed the dunk. It was like they had answers for everything. And I think in a 3-game series, Dean Vickerman is hard to beat. And that's saying that Perth could have 2 home games in a 3-game series. That is putting Melbourne on top, in my opinion, against the odds, against a team that's favored and against a team that is so dominant at home. That's how good I think Melbourne United are.
Yeah, and I'll go one step further. Both Gleeson and Dean Vickerman have been unbelievable, but the best coach in the final series for me is Paul Henare. I think the depth of what Melbourne have got, how he's not coaching in the NBL is beyond me. I think he's a fantastic coach, and teams should be going after him hard as somebody that can. I was really impressed with what he did, over his career and what he's done with New Zealand as well in the national team. So I think that does give them a little bit of an advantage. But quality all round. I mean, the best players and the best coaches are here for this final.
Well, you look down the Perth coach you mentioned, you see Matt Nielsen as well, so no slatches in the assistants.
Yeah, but he hasn't coached a national team. Paul Henare's coached a national team, mate, and overachieved with what he's done. Like a different level than what you're talking about as far as quality.
And happy birthday, Paul Henare. It is his birthday as we're filming today on a Monday. Let's talk predictions. We're looking at the grand final series now. Who's going to win, who we're looking at, and it's a grand final MVP. It's not a final series MVP, so while Cotton and Ware have done things already, it all resets now come game one. Who do you like as that finals MVP and winning the series?
Well, I think for Melbourne United, you just got to either go with Casper Ware Jr. or Chris Golden. Those guys are big game players. They're going to hit big shots down the stretch. There are going to be players that have a key role, but at the end of the day, those are the guys that are going to have the ball in their hand for Melbourne United. And for Perth, am I taking both? Am I taking the show over? Okay, so and for Perth, I'm just going to say.
Now, what do you think the series will be?
The series?
So who wins?
I'm not going to flip. Oh, well, after the whole show, I've been going Melbourne United. I'm not going to flip-flop now. They're going to win in 3 games.
Sweet.
By how many? You want points?
Yeah, you want 3 zip. 3 zip, they win.
Melbourne United are going to sweep. They're going to win game 1 and game 3 in Perth.
Ooh. Did I just go that hard? No. I think.
Do you want time to reflect, mate? That's why you don't jump in early. What I think.
Okay, in 4.
What I think.
That's what pressure is. That's what pressure he does.
I really think 5, but I made a mistake by saying 3. So I'm going to go 4. I'm going to settle on 4.
I like
Melbourne, Perth, Melbourne is what I think will happen. I think Melbourne go over there and pop them straight in the mouth and win the first game. I think they come home, they win game 2 in Melbourne, goes back to Perth, who will be desperate, they win that game, and then they finish it back in Melbourne. I think it's...
How's my math? So that's what?
3-1. Oh. So in 4 is what I think will happen. And I'm not sure that Casper will be MVP. I think he'll have a great influence on the game, but Damien Martin defensively is so hard to be able to play against. I think it might be somebody a little bit different. Maybe somebody like a Kennedy that might be able to get off the chain. We'll see whether White can battle against him, and you can never write off Chris Golding as well if he's matching up on Bryce Cotton.
I like it. Let me just tease it for the fans out there. Let's say it goes to 5. The home teams take care of business.
I hope it goes
1
to 5.
4. I think we'd all like it to see it go to 5.
Yeah.
If it goes to a 5th game in Perth, could you see a Melbourne United able to overcome Perth in that 5th game, or is it 5 games and Perth all of a sudden get a chance?
Are you serious? Mate, they should have already beaten them twice over there. They got robbed with a bad call once, and then Casper Ware missed a little bunny right at the end of the game. They will go over there believing that they can beat Perth. They are not intimidated one bit of the 13,000 Red Army. That's old for someone like Melbourne United, right?
I'm just smiling because you need a fishing rod here. You're just reeling in the Red Army.
I'm just saying what I think, mate. I'm not reeling anything. I'm not fishing.
I like
I'm just saying what I think. We'll see whether it happens.
I like
But they
it.
should win it, though. Perth should win it, right?
They're favourites, 9 out of the
9
last 10.
out of the last
have had
10.
home
They
court
should win.
advantage.
Let's just give it to them, mate.
Well, I
We should
think,
give it to them.
I think, in the best of 5 series, that home court
Is it
advantage.
5 or 3?
In the best of 5.
Yeah, okay.
If it goes to 5.
I was like, I'm pretty sure. In the best of 5 series, I think that home court advantage starts to water down a little bit. It's not as big of an advantage as it is in a 3-game series.
Well, there's no doubt last year we saw one for the ages with Melbourne and Adelaide going to 5, United getting it in the 5th game at home in Melbourne. We'll see what happens this year. Shane has Melbourne in 4, Steve, Melbourne in...
No, Shane has Melbourne in 3.
4. Jeez, can you get it right?
I think they both have Melbourne in
3-1.
4.
It's 4 games.
Oh, my bad.
Steve has Casper Ware or Chris Golding's MVP.
Here, mate,
Shane
look,
says maybe a DJ
add these
Kennedy
up.
coming out of the mix. Time will tell. Friday night, it all tips off.
Where's Alcatel phone? He needs a calculator.
Melbourne taking on Perth. Check it out. Head of the grand final series, it's time to touch on the 5 hottest topics in basketball. We're going to go back and forth, gentlemen, share the ball around. The starting 5, and we'll kick it off with, or tip it off if you like, Ben Madgen joining Mitch Creek at the South East Melbourne Phoenix.
How good is it to have Madge back? One of my favourite players that I've ever coached. And if you're going to start a program and you're going to start it with culture guys, it's the right way to go. So Tommy Greer to be able to get Mitch Creek and Madgen, 2 guys that just work so hard, mentally and physically tough to be able to build their team around. And I reckon he's going to be even better again after his time in Europe. Champion bloke, champion player.
Yeah, exciting one. And if, as rumoured, they had Nathan Sobey and others to that, the Phoenix are going to be tough. Speaking of the carousel of players, there's a few coaching changes. The first announcements come out. The Illawarra Hawks
Paulinari.
signing Matt. I thought you were going to be coaching them. Matt
No,
Flynn,
not a chance.
the head coach of the Illawarra Hawks, Steve.
Yeah, well, I don't know that much about Matty Flynn. I know Matty well, but I haven't seen him actually coach teams. But it just seems, I just thought they made that announcement. That's come early, and they've just got a lot of coaches all around the world from Australia that are waiting for an opportunity to coach at the NBL level. I'm just surprised that they didn't go for someone bigger.
8 spots out there. You mentioned Paul Hanare earlier in the show. There's plenty of coaches. Great opportunity for Matt Flynn. Time will tell whether he can take it with both hands and lead that Illawarra Hawks franchise back to the playoffs. Number 3 is a big one. Andrew Bogut. NBL season over now. Rumoured multiple NBA teams interested in signing him for the remainder of the season. The Golden State Warriors and Philadelphia 76ers, 2 of those, Shane.
I read this morning on Twitter people saying, but he said there was no NBA out. It's like, he's not going. It doesn't need an out. It's the end of the season. What do you mean out?
They have been eliminated.
He's allowed to go. He should be allowed to go. He should go. He would be able to play a great role. I think he'd play a really good role with that experience, and I know the NBA teams value veterans and the experience they bring. He's in great shape, playing good basketball, and I think he would be an unbelievable backup. I'd love to see him back where he won a championship.
Yeah, it'd be great to see him back at the Dubs. Did need Sydney's approval. Sydney have given it, which is good to see. And with the World Cup coming up, wouldn't it be great to see him back in the league?
He owns half the club, mate. What are they going to say? No, can't go. If Andre's allowed to go to Kazakhstan, surely Bogut's allowed to go to the NBA. Let's be honest.
Are we back on Brisbane?
More on that later.
No,
but with the Boomers going towards the World Cup, great to keep Bogut just in that ripping shape. Number 4, Sydney record crowd, 14,569. You were there calling the game, Steve. What was it like seeing a big crowd like that to the end of the season for the Kings?
Super excited to see that many people in the stadium right there. Big game, great atmosphere. My daughter's out there dancing. Of course, they don't use the dancers enough, but I'm always shocked at how Australian basketball can't get the starting 5 right. Watch a college game. Watch Duke. Watch North Carolina. Watch UCLA. Okay, how about go back to an old school game and watch the Bulls? And starting at guard, number 23, North Carolina. It's a big crescendo build up, and it goes right to the game. It's just, in Australia, they do the starting lineups, and then they stop for the national anthem, and then they start making announcements and do community service, people coming up, and lose the momentum. Get it right, starting 5s. That's why.
24 seconds, wasn't it?
Okay.
Hey, I'm going to be a Western Australian here. What do you always got to go on about America for?
I knew. We almost went a whole show without him bashing Americans. A whole show.
A lot, like your point, building the momentum towards tip-off. Big crowd there, though. There'll be some huge crowds in Melbourne and Perth, no doubt, for the finals. 5th one on the starting 5. You've been strong on the bullet, Shane, but you did want to touch on this point. Andre Lamanis touched on Mika Vakona's injury post-game. Talks about he shouldn't have been playing for the Tall Ferns, for the New Zealand national team. Tall Blacks, sorry.
Oh, mate.
My apologies to all our Kiwi
There's no
fans.
need to get personal on our Kiwi friends, mate.
My apologies. Basketball, New Zealand.
You did that on purpose, mate.
That was
What's
worse.
wrong with you?
That was worse than my math.
That's bad.
Basketball New Zealand
And we're not
CEO.
shooting it again.
Basketball New Zealand CEO Ian Potter referred to those comments as a nice bit of theatre from fantasy land. What do you make of that, Shane?
Well, I mean, you can only sit back and we don't understand what's gone on, and you would imagine that New Zealand would have their players' best interests. So you would be disappointed if they made him play. I find that hard to believe that they would have done that. I'm not sure whether communication got mixed up about what level he was at and everything else. But I think Andre was just really emotional after the game. We saw that. We saw how emotional he was, and I think all of the emotion that he's probably had from the last 6 weeks in the season and the blowouts and everything else probably came out around Mika.
And let's not lose in that the heart of a champion and Mika Vakona wanting to play through a partially ruptured Achilles.
Yeah, and they certainly missed him. But I think that emotion came out from everything.
Well, that's the starting 5. That's the hottest topics in basketball. But before we wrap that, just an important one to touch on. Just seen a few promos floating around at odds. Shane Hill, Mark Waugh, Brian Fletcher, Russell Barwick. I'm just wondering where the place for Steve Carfino and Nathan Strimple
So you
is in that
guys
show.
can sub in.
We're just waiting for our call.
Sub in, but you better be able to tip a winner because these guys are on fire in week 1. So it's been a lot of fun. Some good personalities. Fletch, he's out of control. I can tell you that. But no, it's been good. Got to tune in.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, at odds, just some champions of the game chiming in there, care of our friends at Unibet. So we've got time for this week. A big thank you to all of our friends that make it possible to be here. Unibet, Alcatel, also the Daily Telegraph and all of their sister publications, care of News Corp around the country and right here at throwbackstore.com.au where we film. Gentlemen, we're going to be back after Game 2 to just touch in how it's going. Game 1 Friday night, Game 2 Sunday in Melbourne, Game 1 in Perth. It's NBL Finals time. It's exciting.
Yeah, I like the fact that, Shane, you make some very strong opinions, but you don't apologize for them afterwards if they're not right.
When have I not been right? Give me an example and I'll apologise.
Yeah, well, let's see. If Perth win, then you're going to be wrong on the third import.
I will be.
Okay. All right, just for the record.
You got any others?
Saw it right
here. Have I been wrong?
Yeah, I know you. I don't want you to get aggressive. Okay. Yeah.
Two legends of the game, Shane Hill, Steve Carfino. We'll be back after Game 2. We'll see if they were right or wrong. Who knows? Hit us up on Twitter or other social media if you don't like it. But I'm Nathan Stremple, and that was the Basketball Show for this week.